Hi there, I'm Linda and this is Huttons Valley Permaculture. Today I'm out here, as you can hear, with the sheep and the cows. They live a really good life here on the farm. They're well looked after and well fed. But the day does come when some of them head to the freezer, and that's to provide me with nutrient-dense, healing food. I don't take the sacrifice of these animals lightly, and I try and use as much of the animal as possible. Today I'm going to make tallow in two different ways. The first way produces quite a lot of tallow, but the second just produces a small amount. But it depends on the starting ingredient. To show you all of that, let's head to the kitchen. The first method I'm going to show you just produces a small amount of tallow, but also a delicious lamb broth. I've got this shoulder cut, which has got quite a nice fat layer, and I often find that it produces more fat than I usually like to drink along with my broth. So you can actually save that tallow and use it in your cooking for roasting vegetables, or any time you want to fry up something, you can add in a little bit of tallow as your cooking oil. I'm going to put it in the slow cooker for around 8 hours, but first I'll pop that in. Then all you need to do is add in a cup of water, and a teaspoon of salt. Now I've added that piece in from frozen. It doesn't really matter. It should render the fat down to liquid in that time. And at that point I'll remove all the meat and put that aside. Now I'm going to get on to the bulk amount of tallow, for which I'm going to use just straight animal fat. Now I've been storing the animal fat in the freezer just until I get the time to make the tallow. If you want to make tallow but you don't have your own animals to get the fat from, just ask your butcher for it. But if you do ask the butcher, also ask him to mince it for you, because that will remove the next step. I don't mince up the fat myself because I find it just clogs up my mincer, but I do cut it up into small pieces. So basically I just cut it up into fairly small pieces. There's actually a surprising amount of sinew in fat, and that's kind of what you're cutting through to open it up so it'll liquefy in this heating process. So I just cut it up until it's, kind of small. Always use the back of a knife to push things in so you don't blunt your knife. Now just to get the rest of it done, and just keep on going. All my fat's ready now. It's all in fairly small pieces, except for that sinewy bit, but the fat should come out of there okay. I've used different methods to make my big batch tallow before, but I find just putting it in the oven is the most convenient for me. I'm going to make what they call a wet render today, which is you add water to your tallow. You could just put the fat into the oven as is, and that would be a dry tallow, but it produces a fat that's got quite a lot stronger flavour, more like a burger. By using the water, it actually produces a more subtle flavour that you can use sort of more widely in your cooking. So all you need to do is top your tray up with some water, and I'll pop that into the oven. Now during the oven process you do need to check on that to make sure there is still water, it hasn't dried right out. You just need it on a really low oven. I'm just going to have it on around 120, and it should liquefy at that. So in around 4 hours I'll come back and check on that and see if we need to do anything. It is kind of lumpy, and we need to break that up so the fat comes out of that. So that's where the immersion blender will come in, which is A bit on the messy side, but if we're going to get the most out of this fat, then we need to do it. That's why if you can get this minced, you won't have to do this step. I'll just transfer it to this saucepan and then give it a whiz in there so that it doesn't go everywhere. You could try just squashing this through a sieve if you don't have a little blender. All right, I'm just going to leave it at that. Give this a good whiz up and then pop it back in the oven with some water. Now if you're doing this step, be careful because this fat is really hot, and keep the blender down underneath it and just give short bursts. And that's all you need to do. I'll just add a bit of water into that. Just pop that back in for another couple of hours. The fat's been in the oven now for a little over 6 hours actually, and while the whole lot hasn't liquefied, the majority has, so I'm happy with going ahead and filtering this now. There's a good layer of fat there and a lot that will just be filtered out. So we're going to use a muslin cloth on top of just a sieve, and I'm putting it into this saucepan because it is a bit too hot to be putting into a glass bowl. So I'm just going to pop that in that saucepan and it will cool in there, and I can still pop that into the refrigerator. Okay, so that's most of it out there now. You can see that it's quite clear. There will be some water still in here, so we're going to let that cool on the bench here, and then I'll put it into the refrigerator. My tallow is nice and cold now. I've had that in the refrigerator. I'm just going to tip it upside down, and that's all the water coming out. Pop that on the lid. All you do now is use some paper towel and just dry that. So get as much water off as you can. And then what we're going to do is dry our saucepan and then put that back in the saucepan, reheat it, and then put it into some jars. I've just dried my saucepan, so I'm just going to pop that back in to melt. Now I'm just going to have that on a gentle heat and just liquefy it. The fat has melted now, and you can see that's all really clean and clarified. I've just put my jars into the oven and warmed them up. So now I've just got to get this poured carefully into the jars. Not too full because I will be putting these in the freezer. Just need to get some lids onto those and cool all of that down. We'll just leave those to cool. Our slow cooker has finished now. It's been going for 8 hours. So now it's time to just strain out the meat and the bones. I'll be reserving the meat to put back into the broth and maybe add some veggies because it makes a really great soup. Smells really good. And then I'll be just cooling the liquid so that the fat layer solidifies. I'll be sorting out the meat and the bones at this stage before I drain most of it. It really results in a lovely tender lamb. You could even shred that up and have it in sandwiches, but I just love it in the soup. So I'm just going to pour the rest of this into the bowl. It's a really great way to use up the whole piece of your lamb. Nothing gets left on the bone that you discard. It's all broken down. If it's not in the fat or the meat, it's in that gorgeous broth that's down below the fat layer here. So there we have it. We've just got to leave that bowl to cool now, and then I'll put it into the refrigerator, and the fat layer that you can see there will solidify, and that'll be the tallow that we can use. Look at that gorgeous meat. I'll just leave this bowl on my little bench here just to cool and into the fridge. My tallow and broth is nice and cold now, so the fat layer has solidified. You can see there's a lot of fat in comparison to the broth. So when I make my meats like this, I do like to take out a lot of the fat and not include it in my broth when I'm making my lamb soups, because it's just a lot of fat. So I can take that out and use it in other recipes. But let's take that out. I just kind of flip it off and just scrape off the broth. Now, I'm not going to clarify this today. I'm just going to store it in a small container, and I will use it fairly quickly because it's not because it still has some of this broth on, which will deteriorate. You could clarify it just like you do with the larger production. But look at that broth, it's just beautiful. I find it's a really great way to get not only your broth and your fat, but some delicious meats that I'll use in other recipes. I'll use it in my broth soup. I'll also use it in salads, or just generally have a munch on it. I'll be adding just a small piece back like that into my broth when I make my soup, and I'll also be using a piece almost that size when I'm cooking my cauliflower rice, for instance, or stir fries. I'll just use this as the frying fat, and I will use this up really quickly out of the fridge because I haven't purified it. So it's made a really gorgeous gelatinous broth, which is really good for you. And we've got all this beautiful fat here too. So that's my 2 tallows finished. This one here, I'll put in the freezer until I need to use it. In the meanwhile, I'll be using this one up fairly quickly within about the week. I've already made a start on it. I believe that animal fats are healthy fats to include in the diet. This book here actually goes through how saturated fats came to be vilified wrongly over the years. It turns out that vegetable oils are the inflammatory, unhealthy fat. I'll leave a link down below to a YouTube video that goes through this really well. Please check it out and decide for yourself whether to include animal fats in your diet. We don't need to be seeing the amounts of chronic disease that we currently are. We just need to be eating foods that we were designed from the beginning to eat. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and hit the notify button so that you'll be made aware of when I upload my videos. Thanks so much for watching, and bye for now.